Thanks, Chris. So, firstly, thank you to Chris for inviting me along. I'm a real advocate for sharing experience, good or bad, to colleagues to help along the way. I'm a real passionate advocate for self-directed support and using individual service funds. And I'm exceptionally passionate about the 7 keys of citizenship, and I'm really excited to be able to take you on some of the journey that we've had in Cornwall, embedding the 7 keys and implementing ISFs. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the head of commissioning for what's known as working age adults in Cornwall. We have a life course approach through young people, working age adults and older people. And I get the absolute delight of working with many people, supporting individuals and those individuals with learning disabilities or who are autistic or who may need support with their mental health. It's not easy. It's not easy working in the context that we're working right now, and implementing ISFs. And I'm going to present a very honest view of the journey we've been on. And let's just say, it's not started in the last couple of years. We started our ISF journey probably back in about 2017. It's been a roller coaster ride. So I'd like to take you on that roller coaster with me for a few minutes to understand what's worked and what hasn't worked with ISFs in Cornwall. So Sanjay, can I go to the next slide, please? I don't know how many of you that have ever been on the Blackpool roller coaster. That's probably the most scary one I've ever been on. But certainly the clunking as you go up the incline to the top of the slope. I suffer from vertigo, so I spent most of the time with my eyes shut. But in 2017, we thought we were at the top of that roller coaster. We were really excited. We thought we understood individual service funds. We wanted to bring providers on board. That was our absolute priority. We were coming up to our 2nd generation of supported living contract. So we had a real opportunity here to work with providers in a different way. So we thought, well, how can we go about this? We need to make sure we've got a good agreement with providers. We've got a group that we work with. How do we take this forward? So we decided that we would embed ISFs as part of the procurement, as part of the contract for supported living, or supportive lifestyles, as we called it in Cornwall, because it wasn't just about accommodation support, it was supporting people at home as well. And we embedded the agreement for ISFs in the contract. And we went out to tender and people ticked the box and said, yep, we're interested in ISFs. We'd like to work with you. They signed the agreement once they were successfully onboarded to the contract, and off we went. And that was about as much as we did at that point in time. Sorry, back please, Anja. Off we went. We careered down the slope. And quite honestly, we saw people lose interest, we lost momentum, and it all became a bit of a flop. And we had to take some long, hard looks at ourselves as to say, well, what went wrong? We had the provider, we had the agreement, we understand what individual service funds are. Why are people not taking it up? Why this is a no-brainer to us. Well, I'm sure you can start seeing the flaws in the process there. And as did we at that point in time. But in all honesty, as we'll all recall, what then happened in 2020 was the COVID years came along and the pandemic hit and resources were redirected. And that included the resource that we really needed to implement on ISFs. And I think, in a way, looking back, perhaps it was a missed opportunity because people started actually self-directing their own support. Providers started taking more responsibility and working and listening to individuals and doing things differently. And I suspect perhaps without that change in practice, we may not have had the success when we have tackled it again. So we reviewed, but during that period in time, there was quite a catalyst of change that happened in Cornwall. Cornwall invited LD England and the LGA to come down and do a peer review of our LD services. I had been at that point in time, and I'm not disowning anything, but I'd been working in another area of the council, and I'd come back to adult social care commissioning as the head of commissioner 2 weeks before that peer review. And our DAS in Cornwall joined a week before that peer review. And we both sat listening to the feedback. And whilst it wasn't all bad, it really wasn't all bad at all, there was some uncomfortable moments in the feedback that we got. And I think it was the real generator for change that we saw. And principally, it was the generator for change that really resulted in a drive for personalisation in this particular space, because that was absolutely what people were telling us in that feedback. And what we also learned very rapidly, that the experts are within our communities. They are the people that are drawing on the services, and we need to be listening to them much better. So that really was the catalyst of change. There was a further change that came about that really created inspiration within Cornwall, and that was the invitation of Simon Duffy and Wendy Perez into Cornwall to come down to the Eden Project and present and talk to us about their book Everyday Citizenship. And I will tell you, I went into that Eden Project session. It was run not by council officers, we were invitees. It was run by a peer advocate group who ran the session. It was the majority of which in the audience were people with lived experience. It was probably the real eye-opener that I got on what you could do with a fabulous co-production session that was chaotic. It was glorious. The first thing we did when we walked in the door was getting given paint to hand paint. There was Lego, there was sticky toys, there was drawing, there was colouring, there was singing. It was the most amazing event I'd ever been to. And I thought, we couldn't have done this as a council commissioner. We would never have had this vision. But the productivity, the vibe, the energy in the room that day was what really inspired me then to really realise that we needed to listen and understand what really resonated. And what was resonating in that room that day was how people were relating to the 7 keys of citizenship. And that for me was the turning point on how could we potentially use this as an outcomes-based framework. We talked about outcomes-based commissioning for years, but suddenly I could see a light at the end of the tunnel on how we could create a common language approach, create a framework that was really embedded in outcomes-driven commissioning, support planning and language. So we revisited the ISF model. We did reiterate our approach in embedding in the contract, but this time we put some real key critical success factors behind it, and that's what I will take you through those critical factors. Next slide, please, Sandra. So very quickly, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. The first thing that we had to do was find the right motivation and making that case for change, and then not losing sight of it throughout. It is not easier. We have now been doing this for 2.5 years. And you will be pleased to know that the reason Chris has invited me is because we are on a success journey. So it hasn't all been doom and gloom and failure, but there's been a lot of learning on the way. It was about really embedding a commitment to change. We had the catalyst and the feedback from the peer review that really supported that change. We had the inspiration from some of the events that we then started to attend as commissioners, as social care practitioners, that were all being led by peer advocate groups, by people with lived experience that were inviting us along as willing participants. And we resourced the change, because we don't resource the change, you won't deliver the change. Individual service funds as well are a sum of many parts. We didn't look this time to just isolate the work and think that it would just organically grow. We realised what part it played in personalisation and what part it played in self-directed support, and that programme that we needed to drive behind it to make it work. I've talked about how much we needed to listen and learn from our communities, and we needed to make sure that we were doing true co-design and co-production, but that we were listening to our providers as well. There is absolutely no point writing specifications, writing agreements, suggesting that all of this is going to work without knowing that it's deliverable. And our provider group and our provider relationship in Cornwall is now at a level it wasn't at previously. We're really well engaged with those individuals who are our key strategic providers and have really supported us on this journey. And it's about not taking your foot off the gas and really persevering. Should we go to the next slide, please, Sandra? So finding that right motivation. It will be different in different authorities and different national bodies in the way that we work. You may have a leadership team that just wants to be the best. They want to have the most ISFs and be number one on the chart. Chris shares quite often on LinkedIn how we're seeing the success of the numbers. That might be the driver. A bit of healthy competition is always helpful in this space, but it wasn't our driver at that point in time. It may be a driver, a key driver being about saving money. Again, in Cornwall, that's not our key driver, but it's certainly a byproduct of it. And I can talk to you about how some of that has happened. So again, it helps with that case for change that we can already evidence where by supporting someone to have the right outcomes and to direct their own support, it is actually cheaper than commission care through our contracts and which are at risk of a one size fits all. What we did find though in Cornwall, our motivation was just about doing it right and doing right by all our citizens, and that wanting to make sure that we really are ensuring choice and control by putting the person in control of their own personal budget. We are a DP first, we have a DP first model, but ISFs are a close second, as opposed to trying to go directly to the contracted route, which we've been guilty of in the past. The thing I talked to Chris about when we have met up is very much my view, and it's my personal view, but it's my view of an ISF, and that an ISF is not just another way of paying a provider. So therefore, in Cornwall, I don't think we ever will have thousands of ISFs. We never will be number one, because it's really important to us that we retain the integrity and the purpose of an ISF, and that way we can deliver the true potential of that approach. And that's about choice and control for individuals, and they're really at the heart and the centre of how their ISF is being spent and their personal budget's being spent. Next slide, please, Sandra. So I touched on commitment and resource there. I do believe that it takes a real commitment, it takes tenacity, and I think that's something I have in bucket loads, and my team really benefit from that we don't give up, that we keep going. As I've said, we've been at this for a while. We didn't always get it right, but in more recent years, the learning that we've applied, keeping the foot on the pedal, resource it. We developed a personalisation programme that's been absolutely critical to supporting self-directed support and the ISF implementation in Cornwall. And that resource, we were very lucky. We participated in the accelerated reform funding. We were able to use that grant to employ someone to lead our personalisation and our projects that we identified through ARF. And some of those were supporting carers, some of that was supporting personalisation. But what that meant was we were able to really test out and evidence the benefit of having a strategic lead role in personalisation. And we've now converted that into a permanent post, and we've committed the investment and funding and resource of that post because it's so critical. We believe in the way that we are reframing social care in Cornwall and supporting that self-directed support movement. Next slide, please. Key to all of this, and I touched on at the beginning because we thought it was the real sort of main factor, is our providers. Our providers are providing support. but it's about working with those providers around how they can adopt and utilise and work with individuals with those individual service funds. At a recent LDA Commissioners Conference, someone on this call, Simon, and I quote, said, "Don't work with providers you don't trust." And that landed, that really, as a commissioner, that really landed with me. It's absolutely right. It is trust, it is honesty, it's transparency, it's about the relationship that we have with our providers that makes ISFs work. If you don't trust and have that open relationship and try to work through a series of agreements, clauses, contracts, this is the approach you must do, it takes away all of that flexibility, all of that empowerment, all of that ability to work with that individual. So as a commissioner, it's about letting go of the grip and control and handing it over to the individual who will work closest with that provider who's supporting that care, and trusting that provider that they are going to do the right thing. We all come into care because we care, whether we're providing it, whether we're commissioning it, whether we're delivering it, whether we're a care worker. We're all doing it because we care and we want to give the best outcome for individuals. We also found that whilst we'd opened up our contracts to all of our providers to come and be ISF providers, there's only ever going to be a willing few. And they, I call it our early adopters. They're the ones that you want to explore and explain. You understand the mutual benefit of it from a commissioning perspective, from a provider perspective, and most importantly, from the individual's perspective. Once you've got that shared understanding of the benefit of it, it means that you can adopt it and take it forward further into the journey. It's about building that confidence and training for providers as well. This is new to them as well, and the opportunities and the creativity that can be really embraced. Bring the experts in. We've got some great providers in the country who are prepared to join conversations in your local region about what's worked for them, why it's been a success, what does an ISF mean to them. Utilise that network, utilise them as key speakers, because they will be really listened to. That peer-to-peer, provider-to-provider, business-to-business conversation is really important to be facilitated by commissioners. And embed the operating model, understand how it's going to work. We are often guilty of being very process driven, very service centric in commissioning. That's not what we are in Cornwall. We've adjusted our processes to reflect and respect the need for flexibility. And that's how do we ensure that our process support the integrity and the deliverability of ISFs in Cornwall. And that's made a significant difference. And collecting those local success stories and sharing them. And then, as I say, tenacity kicks in. You repeat it and you repeat it again, and you keep the momentum going. Next slide, please, Sandra. So I touched on not tackling ISFs in isolation. It really is a sum of parts. You need to have that strength-based assessment at the beginning to understand when we're looking at how we're determining what someone's personal budget what looks like. We've embedded a much more positive approach with our what matters support planning, and that's absolutely framed now around the 7 keys of citizenship. The self-directed support, I touched on the fact that we're a DP first, we have a DP first model. We really have to look at, if someone can't have a DP, why not? How are we supporting them to have a direct payment? If they can't have direct payment, the next best thing is an individual service fund. And after that, if we've explored all of that and that option, then we may move to a commission care contract. I touched on co-production, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And again, about that person-centered approach to the way that we're working, that's delivered by ISFs, that means people feel empowered, and critically, they'll end up achieving the outcomes because they're being driven by what's important to them. And then the 5th point really here is around that citizenship. Next slide, please, Sandra. So co-production was something that is absolutely key in regard to that ability to drive the personalisation, and it's one of the key sums of the parts that I'm talking about. Without co-production and understanding what individuals really understand around individual service funds, then you may have a provider with the training and the peer support to be able to understand that, but it's important that individuals are really aware of the benefit of an ISF to them, and that's really well communicated. And what we found is there's no better way to communicate it other than from people who are also using ISFs and the experiences that they're having and the successes they're having. We've embedded co-production, and I mean true co-production. There is a place for engagement, there's a place for consultation, but for us, co-production and co-design has been that we start at the beginning and we go on the journey together, and that we create that product. Now, that might be what the specification of what we're looking for looks like. We may be that we are looking at a whole total service redesign. We may be looking how we train people, but the co-production is absolutely key to make sure that we start with a blank page and that we work it through together, and that we are all equals at that table. It's not about us having a design in our minds as commissioners and we want to validate it and test it out a little bit. It is genuinely about starting at the beginning together with people who are going to draw on services and with that lived experience. So we've developed a co-production framework. We've developed, well, we haven't, I say we, it is a co-produced framework and a co-produced toolkit. And that toolkit is now being used, and individuals and support workers and social care workers, commissioners are all being trained. But again, they're being trained by people with lived experience who helped write our toolkit for co-production, and showing people what it really means to them. And so that's how we're using it in commissioning. And then again, at an individual level, we've talked about how we focus on DPs and individual service funds. But what I will say is really important is there are so many tools out there. We use the 247 grid, the tool that Rachel Mason developed. It's a great visual tool that supports people to see their journey towards supporting them to maximise their independence and how they're using their personal budget. We work with NDTI, we work with PPL, we work with a whole host of people. And I must say, again, walking into the LDA Commissioners Conference in March, I thought, it's all been laid out here for us. It's all of the people that I've been reaching out to and working with over the last couple of years, they were there, they were in the room. So, you know, as future commissioners going forward, really trying to look at how you're going to embed ISFs in your region, then really embrace things like the commissioners' conferences that are being laid on, because they're all being laid on to support us to do our jobs. So embrace that and really bond in with the network, ensure that we've got strengths-based assessments, ensure that our social care practitioners are absolutely sighted, understand and fully collaborative, working around embedding individual service funds with providers and with individuals supported. Next slide, please. We've all talked about person-centred care for decades and personalisation. Sometimes it feels like we still talk about it as if it's new. It really isn't, and it really shouldn't be. It is embedded in practice, but it is really important that we recognise its place and how we can enhance that person-centred care and make sure that the person is being at the centre of everything that is being talked about, that nothing is done without them. And how that then can lead towards more people being willing to self-direct their support because they have that confidence, and more people and providers willing to take on ISFs because they're given confidence that they can go and be creative and they can do things differently and they will be supported and not wrapped over the knuckles for being different. The 7 keys to citizenship, I'm going to get there very quickly in a moment, around what that really means to us in Cornwall. But equally, that's all underpinned by community-led support. We need the support, we need the information, we need to know what's going on in communities, because we're very much moving away from that service-centric approach that we've had for decades in adult social care. But without individuals knowing what's available to them, for them to go and purchase and try to do different things, it can be tricky to get it started and to give that confidence to be creative. Next slide, please, Sanja. So, 7 keys of citizenship. I've touched on my first introduction to the 7 keys of citizenship. And in Cornwall, we've done a lot of training around it. But I've been very blessed that in Cornwall, we have a number of peer advocate groups who've really embraced the 7 keys and have really led the work in Cornwall across the training of social care practitioners, training of commissioners, training for providers. And what we did in Cornwall was say, okay, if this is going to be our outcomes-based framework, and this is what people are telling us it means to them, we will fully commit to it. So what we've done is within our commissioning cycle, we work to the IPC commissioning cycle, analyse, plan, do, review, for those of you that are commissioners on the call. We've embedded the 7 keys in each of those four quarters of the cycle. So when we're planning and are doing our co-production is commissioned and led by people with lived experience, and they will frame it around the 7 keys. And they will understand what that means. What does purpose mean to an individual? How can a provider within a contract start thinking about how they can support someone to achieve the outcomes they want to achieve under these headings of the 7 keys? Because those headings will mean something different to every individual. So again, it's not trying to take 7 keys and create one size fits all. Is about recognizing that every single one of us on this call will look at those 7 headings and it will mean something to everybody. So it's about being as responsive as possible with the support that can be provided, but we'll co-produce using the headings. Those headings will then inform our contracts. So we're now embedding the 7 keys within our contracts. So our specifications, our KPIs, are outcomes based because they're focused on the same language that everybody is now using in Cornwall. Our procurements, method statements are written by people with lived experience and they're evaluated by those people with lived experience. And they are again under the themes of the 7 keys. So we're embedding it in procurement. Our contract management that we do, I think we're very much less, and I can see a couple of Cornwall providers on the call, and hope they absolutely feel I'm reflecting that the relationship that we have with providers now is much more collaborative. It isn't about using contracts to hit people with sticks, and it's not the carrot and stick model that we used to all work to. It's very much about collaboration. It's looking for the mutual benefit. It's looking for the win-win. It's looking how we can support individuals jointly as best we can. And again, having that common language has really helped us to do that. So through contract management, we ask providers to evidence how they're delivering those outcomes. But again, we've adopted the theme because it brings commonality that people can understand into a corporate world. We still do. I work in a corporate world, so I'm trying to be that conduit between the language that we use and the language that's used in corporate world, and we're trying to change that language to something that's much simpler, much more accessible, and much more relatable to people, and it's working well. Something I got very excited about recently was I went to a transitions conference in Cornwall just last week, and our transitions team were there, and when I walked into the room, a whole pile of everyday citizenship books were there on the table. And they talked to new parent carers coming through with the children, moving from children's, preparing for adulthood. And they talked to them how they use the 7 keys. And because that is about what is the outcome that those young people are looking for in their life, what's the next step for them? And it's in a language that they understood. And then for me, just yesterday, I was in a meeting with the NHS and Public Health, and we're looking to develop our LD strategy in Cornwall jointly with the NHS and Public Health. Are doing our JSNA, and they've accepted the challenge that they will frame our JSNA under the 7 key theme so that we can embed even the statistics that we're looking at around our needs assessment in a way that is outcomes based. It's taken off in a way that I probably couldn't ever imagine 2.5 years ago, when I had a bit of a vision and I got very inspired by Simon and by Wendy. So I'm really grateful to them to introduce us to that. But yeah, it's really taken off. People have really embraced it in Cornwall, and I'm really excited to see what that JSNA looks like. It will be out there, and I'm sure I'll come back and share it in due course. Final slide, please, Sandra. So I said there about telling the stories. Stories are powerful. I've picked 3. I'm conscious of time, and I'm sure we want to have time for questions and a conversation. But if I can just draw your attention to Crumpet. Crumpet is gorgeous, and there's a bit of a story to this one. It's a young man who's working with one of our providers, who started getting supported by one of the providers as he came into adulthood. He'd had a very traumatic childhood. And those providers started talking to him in a way that framed the language about what's important to him, what had given him purpose, what did the love bring to him, what did life mean for him, what would he like to do. He wouldn't leave the house. He had 2-to-1 support. He was really struggling. And one of the things that came out was he'd always had pets. He'd always had a dog all the way through some of the trauma he went through as a child. He'd always had a dog. And he was in supported living at the time. So there was an approach made by the team as, could he have a dog in the house? There was a question mark, obviously, around some of the challenges he was experiencing at the time as to whether he could really look after a dog. So what the team decided to do was, well, we're going to prove it. We're going to work with him. So they supported him to go to dog training. They supported him to create a real evidence base that actually, if he was to have this dog, this could really change his life and give him the real purpose that he needed. And he went through the process. He absolutely embraced it. The team really supported him to do that. And he has now got Crumpet. And not only that, he has left the house. He's joined a gardening group because he can take the dog with him to that gardening group. He's now talking about joining. He's now going to local college to signing up to some courses, and he's talking about how to build a CV to get some work. He couldn't leave the house before that, but this was through that team listening, that team finding a way to flex his support, and in ensuring that what was most important to him was actually something that they could support him to do. There are other stories on there. I won't go into them because I'm conscious of time, but trust me, stories are powerful. And if you can tell those stories, that's where you'll inspire others. That's us. That's Cornwall. I think that's the final slide, isn't it, Sandra? But that's the journey we've been on. There we go. There are the 6 steps. In summary, get off the starting blocks, motivate people, know your motivation. The support for those early adopters, make sure that you're identifying, the nurturing, you're celebrating those stories that they're coming forward with. Use those local and national experts in the room. Share those success stories, grow your movement, really get those followers. Once you've got the early adopters and you've got the stories out there, you'll start getting the followers coming on board as well, wanting a piece of the action. Bit of healthy competition. If this provider's doing it, why are you not doing it? It really works well. And then make sure that you're committing that resource, because you have to be tenacious. You have to keep going at it. It isn't easy. And finally, think big. Don't just think about ISFs, think about your whole personalisation journey, because it's all interlinked. And if you do it in isolation, it won't work. Trust me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. That was amazing. So I think we're going to just open up the floor. Has anybody got anything they want to talk about or share or ask Karen? Okay.
Can I just say, wow, thank you, Karen. That would. That would. I don't think I have any questions. I'm just so chuffed. There's so much that I had no idea about, and I'll let Wendy know that it had that effect for you. And I think that it's lovely to hear that. I'd say, like, maybe it's not the most essential thing in a way, but it's your logical coherence that I liked particularly.
Thank you, Simon, and certainly, appreciate the recognition that and the conversations that we've had as well about the work we're doing in Cornwall. But actually, when we went up to Parliament together and brought, our co-chair there, David, and other members of our co-production groups and our lived experience from Cornwall, all to tell their stories. There were some real moments in that room where, listening to their stories, and I could tell that the two baronesses that were hosting us were really moved by what they were hearing, and how valuable it was to them to hear the true stories was really inspirational. Yet again, they came back very motivated, and that, I think, is the point that I'm trying to make. Is there will be moments where it feels a bit stale and you feel a bit complacent, but actually it just needs a little bit more injection of that inspiration, and you pick it up again and you run with it again.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry, Kate, did you want to come in? I think you had your hand up.
No, it's fine.
Are you okay? Okay,
You don't
cool.
know? No, I've got something to say. I've always got something to say. So, I just wish, in a way, Karen, I just sort of, it's for presentation, it's for conversation. I sort of wish we'd had 2 years ago, because I started working on ISFs nearly 2 years ago. And there's so much in what you said, which I can absolutely relate to. But there are other areas, I think, that within, so I'm at Bournemouth, Christchurch and Paul. So we're just growing our co-production, our strategic approach to co-production. And I can see now just how much value they can add to each other. So we've got a bit out of sync, but I think looking at ISFs as a slow burner and keep that tenacity, keeping going with them, I can see that's the route. But at the same time, putting that structure, so we're just about to put our ISF lots in our framework. We'll have the same thing. People will tick the box and say, yeah, interested in that. That sounds good, I'm sure. But it's that conversion, isn't it? And it's the hearts and minds that are required, and not just, because you're right. I think everything you said absolutely chimed with me. You've got a few providers who absolutely get it, can't wait to be providing, delivering, holding ISFs, supporting people in that way. The rest, it is just, there's going to have to be quite a lot of work and tenacity required to keep on going. So thank you so much. I'm just going to take so much away from what you said. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, yeah. Hi, Gary.
Yes, thank you, Karen. I just wanted to doff my cap, really, in your general direction. As a social entrepreneur, the steps that you've taken really resonate from concept through to delivery. You've gone through that sort of route of, and thanks for being honest. It was just really more of an observation. The route you've gone through, it's quite refreshing to see like a big establishment going through the same pain points as maybe like a micro business does in starting something new, and going through and pivoting and trying something. And the work that you've had with that you've done with Simon is obviously paying off, but you've gone through the hard yards, and it's just good. It's good to see, and I just wanted to acknowledge it. So thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I mean, at times it feels like we're turning a tanker here, and I know, people have been doing this a lot longer than me, and I fully respect the tenacity of everybody who keeps on with the commitment and the confidence that one day we really are going to make the change. But what I want to play back to the room really is that it can happen, it can work, and it is working. It isn't also down to just one individual. It's not just down to me. There is a whole ethos now embedded in the way that Cornwall social care works, and that goes across, like I say, providers, social care practitioners, commissioners, across the whole council. And one of the things I didn't touch on either is I did touch on how passionate our DAS is as well around personalisation, but our co-production group is now moving to a place where it's accessible to the whole council. So every commissioner, whether it's commissioning waste, bus services, they all have access to our co-production group, because those are individuals that are going to be using those services, not just adult social care services, they're using those services as well. So we've developed a platform, we've developed the group, they're really excited, and there's some really early adopters across the council with fellow commissioners who are really interested in the co-production work that we've done.
Jessie.
Hi, I'm from Torbay Council, so just across the river, and we are still really trying to improve our self-directed support, and it's not been easy. And I'm very new. I've only been here 6 months, so I'm just learning about how things don't move very quickly in the council. But I was wondering what your thoughts are on, if we still haven't got direct payments in a comfortable and secure place, would you suggest let's get direct payments done, you know, as in better and improved before doing ISFs, or would you just go do it all together? Because I know that you sort of said direct payments first, but as in is first choice in Cornwall, but would you also have say that you did direct payments well to start off with before moving towards ISFs?
No, we did it together.
Did you?
It absolutely. It comes back to the point about having that real clarity around what personalisation and what self-directed support means in its entirety, and that DP is an option and ISF is an option, and actually they need to run in tandem, because I forgot also, we brought managed DPs in. We've also tested having neutral ISF providers as well, not necessarily providers that are providing support at the same time. And we've got lessons that we're learning through that at the moment. So it's about trying these different things, but it's making sure that the fundamental, the basics are in place, so the options are there.
The choice and control is
that information, the understanding around what the community offer is that can support those, how we tap into our VCSE. So it's an expanding story, that journey that we're on. We're a long way from the end, but that fundamental basic DP ISFs go together.
That's what I think so as well. So I'll say that back, but we'll see how it lands. But I've got 2 more questions. I'm so sorry. But one is, you know, you said about your co-production team is available to any council department that might want them. How was your co-production team created? Was it sort of people invited? Did you go out to make sure you had a sort of selection that came from anywhere within Cornwall and, you know, different walks of life, etc.? How did you come about it? Do you have a budget for it? You know, do you pay them, etc.? Because I know that's quite a contentious issue sometimes. So yeah, I was wondering about how your co-production's working.
Yep, so we have a co-production steering group, and we've just opened that up, that annually we all get together in a room, 100 people all together, and it's about, I see them as a bit of they're an octopus. They've got the tentacles out. And what we've developed on a platform is an opportunity. So we put out the opportunity to engage in the co-production of a particular service, and this is the new bit that we're doing with the wider council. And they will reach out to their networks, and we pay depending on the level of involvement. So if we're on a project and we've got people with lived experience who are committed to that project, they're fully paid. If it's travel expenses to an event or costs, then that's paid. We developed within our framework a real commitment, and therefore that went through and got signed off so that we got a budget behind it. Not big money, but it's certainly sufficient for us to be able to really ensure that individuals are supported and respected and valued equally when they're in that room with us, and they're contributing their time and their efforts. So there's absolutely a commitment.
And I'm thinking commitment. No, you know, I know, but the budget as well. I was thinking about, because I've been going to lots of different events for different council departments, and they're all talking about how they're trying to be inclusive and trying to, you know, make sure their information is accessible and this is that. And I said, oh, you know, and actually a co-production group really could be funded by all departments in the council, and because it's beneficial for all departments in the council. And my one other question, which is a kind of a big one, is probably a side note, so feel free to email me this, but the sort of a platform of knowledge of what is out there as provision, because it could be, because it's sort of not necessarily, like you say, a commissioned service. It could be something more creative of how you could spend your, which is my dream, but everyone's gone, if you have a database of information, it's out of date immediately. And I'm like, yeah, but what about a platform where sort of people who, you know, a music therapist or you know, a personal trainer or something, whatever it might be, that has perhaps, you know, done certain things with mental health or with physical disabilities or something. But I was wondering, how do you have a sort of a way that you're sort of not advertising, but, you know, positioning people so that people can see what's available?
Yeah, we absolutely are. But I think there's a pitfall to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
And one is, if you try to create too much of a directory, you start directing people into services and into support. But the whole principle that we're trying to do is around that creativity. People know what's in their communities and how they and their support teams know what's in their communities. They are the real advocates for that localism, that ability to be able to tap into what's going into their community. So I would say, careful of the pitfall of trying to create a directory around what support is. There is a balance between creating the inspiration to be creative and inspire people to have new ideas. And again, that might be that early adoption. We want to make things as simple as possible. I once heard someone say, if you want to direct people into a certain direction, in a certain way, make it as easy as possible. If you don't want them to use a route, make it harder. And therefore, when it comes back to that point I was making about processes, do make sure that your processes on the stuff that you want them to do are as simple as possible.
Got you.
And people will go down that route.
I think it was Greenwich or something was saying that they sort of do a monthly, or, you know, they do a direct payment or a self-directed budget, like newsletter or something. But perhaps that will be a place to sort of show examples of someone, you know, using something creatively, like you say, might inspire people. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Working with someone on this call we're working with at the moment around, again, creating another tool. We've got some great aspirations around enabling that access, people to purchase directly, use their direct payment or their self ISF to purchase directly these types of support services. So actually the whole sort of purchasing, brokering and all of that is just taken out of the mix completely.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you.
Real. Okay, thank you. I think that's probably all the questions. Karen, are you happy if people reach out to you directly if they've got anything they want to follow up on?
Yeah, sure. I will say, I'm sure you appreciate how busy it gets, and sometimes it can be a bit do we open up the email address? But like I say, I'm a real advocate. I know certainly, Jessie, it might be worth us having a conversation around the sort of Southwest Peninsula Commissioner group. Welcome you to have that conversation as well.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I've learned a lot from other commissioners, and if I could just share a little bit of my experience here today, that's absolutely what I'm here to do.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Karen. I really appreciate your time and giving up your time for this. Excellent. Okay, great. Well, I think on that note then, I think we can finish on time. Just say thank you everybody for coming along. And we should be releasing a whole new programme for next year. We've got hopefully some more interesting stuff coming out, and we'll publish that in the new year. So hopefully I will see you, if not before the festive break, and I'll see you in the new year.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris and everyone. That was a great session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.